everyone. I hope you're all really, really well and are looking forward to painting a very cute Jubilee Corgi picture. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll go through. Oh, hi Amy, hello. Yeah, we'll go through all of the colours, all the equipment that you're going to be needing to paint this gorgeous picture, and then we'll get started with the painting. So a few things through YouTube as well. As you can see, Amy has already used that live chat. So if any point you want to ask questions or just have a general chit chat, feel free to log into your YouTube account. So if you've got a Gmail account, you can just use that to log in, and I'll see it on my screen coming through. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions. And yeah, you can pause it and you can rewind the stream as many times as you need to. So I think this is quite a straightforward one. It looks a lot more complex than it actually is, but you are more than welcome to really take your time with this. So I'm going to be painting for roughly about an hour and a half. It might be slightly under, it might be slightly over, but yeah, you can literally spend as long as you want on this. Well, you can have about 2 days to paint this painting because we keep the link open for about 2 days. But if you do need it any longer, just let us know. So what we'll need then for painting is a canvas to paint on. So I've got a 16 by 20 inch canvas. You can do it on any size, and that'll be absolutely fine. So we've got canvas. We also need some tissue or kitchen roll or something just to clean our brushes as we're going. And then we need some water. See, I've got a cup of water here. We actually only need 3 brushes as well. I don't know why I've got 4 brushes, so I'll just put that one to the side. So we've got a cup of water because we're using, well, I'm using acrylic paints. So yeah, we want to use quite a lot of water with the paint just to keep it nice and fluid. It makes it flow much easier onto the canvas. And brushes that we're going to be using are the 3 normal Brush Party brushes. So we've got the big, oh, I will just explain that. So I haven't got any paints on my palette yet. But you just really need the primary colours. So red, yellow, blue, black and white, and then a little bit of purple if you want to. So if you've got a premixed purple, you can use that as well. But yeah, I will put them on my palette as well. So you just need a big brush for the background. So I've got a slightly larger flat brush. You might have an angled brush. Both are totally fine. Then I've got a smaller angled brush and a little pointy one as well. Don't worry if I haven't got all of those brushes. It's totally fine. So in terms of paint, we're going to need some white. We're going to need quite a lot of white for this. It might be worth maybe doing a blob of white for your background and then another bit of white for the details in the dog. So I've got 2 blobs there. Then we're going to need some blue for the background, or any colour you want to do for your background. So I'm going to do a little splodge of blue. I've got a cyan blue, but you can use any kind of blue as well. And then we've got some yellow, because we need the yellow to make the golden brown colour. And then we need a little bit of red. And I'll just show you my palette as well in a second. So I got my colours all spread out on the palette. If you want to grab a second palette or something, you're more than welcome to use 2 palettes. You might want one for your paints and one for mixing. You can use a plate from the kitchen, you can wax some cling film over it, or you can use a Tupperware lid, or if you've got a paper plates are perfect. So if you do have a premixed purple, that looks really, really nice for the crown, but you're more than welcome to do some mixing as well. So I'm going to put a little bit on there just so you can see the 2 different types of purple that you get. But yeah, I'll just show you my palette now. So we've got all those colours, whoops, on the plate. So yeah, might be worth just keeping the paints nearby just so you can top up as we go through. So that's everything we need for equipment, and I think that's pretty much everything you need to know before we should get started. Oh, it's a cyan blue, so it's a really bright blue, but if you want to use an ultramarine blue, that's a slightly more purpley blue, but any blue is perfect. We're only really using it for the background, that's the main bit we use it for. And if you want to make it make the purple from the blue and red, then you can use the blue then as well. So the background is super, super easy. We're going to use the big brush, and we're just going to do big, messy brush strokes covering the whole canvas with your colour of choice for the background. So I'm going to do a bit of blue, and I'm going to mix it with quite a lot of white. So to start with, I would recommend dipping your largest brush into your water, give it a good swirl around. And then we're going to pick up a big scoop of white paint and I'm going to pop it onto a new part of the palette. So I've got a little space next to my blue where I'm going to put my white and I'm going to add a little dot of blue. So you don't actually need that much blue for this because I'm going to keep my background quite light just because I don't think that the colours in the Corgi will stand out as much if it's a dark background. So I'm going to make my background quite pale with quite a lot of white. So I've literally just poured over a really small amount of blue. And if you've got a brush like mine where you've got like a flat brush, then you just want to be pressing it down and keep the paint on a small area of the palette like this, just pressing it down side to side. And then we're going to go with big, messy brush strokes. You can't go wrong with this bit, literally covering the whole canvas. So you want to make sure you're covering all of the little dots in the canvas, so getting into every single bit of groove that you've got going on. If you've seen little white dots showing through, then that means you've not got enough paint on your brush, so keep it topped up all the time. If it goes a bit dry, a bit sticky, just whack a bit of water in there. Mix it into your palette first. You definitely don't want to be going from the water straight onto the canvas because that's when you get some drips. So you always want to mix it into your palette first. And you want the paint to be nice and creamy. So it's almost like a double cream consistency. So it's going to flow really nicely and yeah, spread quite well. So I'm literally going all different directions with the brush because it's quite nice to have it nice and textured. So as I'm doing these brush strokes, I'm using the width of the brush. So I'm getting really thick lines. Now, if you find that it's coming out quite dark, you can break up that blue with some pure white on the brush. So you can just literally dip it straight into the white paint and pop that on the canvas. And because it's a bit more transparent, the white paint isn't quite as pigmented as the other colours. So you can actually just use that and blend on the canvas rather than always mixing paints on the palette every single time. And another thing as well, when you're doing these backgrounds, if you want to make it quite textured but blended at the same time, it's a really good idea to be lifting off of the canvas every time you do a brush stroke. So if you're finding that you're getting these little sharp marks, hang on, if I just do a few down here, like these little vertical lines, when they dry, for some reason they're really hard to get rid of. So I always like to just flick the brush, literally take it off the canvas every time you do a brush stroke, and it just makes it blend quite nicely. And the paint's going quite dry quite quickly, so I'm adding more water into it. So you can definitely add like any colour into this if you want to. So you could add some purple in, you could pop a little bit of yellow if you wanted to make some bits a little bit turquoise or a bit like green even. You can literally do anything. But if you do change it slightly, I would love to see them. So it's always good to like take photos as we're going through, because for quite a while it looks like a seal. Like the shape of it is really strange. So when you get to those really odd stages, take a step back, take a photo, and yeah, it'll be nice to see them at the end. So yeah, do take the photos and do change the colours if you want to. Oops, gosh. Also, the edges of the canvas definitely need to be painted. So when you have done most of your background, I would just take the brush around the very, very sides of the painting, so right down the edges and along the top. I wouldn't do the bottom just yet, just because it's always good to have like one edge free, just in case you need to dry it. And you can always do that at the end. But yeah, I'm not over blending it too much. So although we're trying to make it look slightly blended, it's still got the different colours going through. So I've got some areas where the blue is a little bit darker, and I've got other areas where the white's a bit more strong. So yeah, if at any point, if I go too fast or you just don't get what I'm talking about, feel free to use that live chat as much as you need to. I am more than happy to just repeat stuff lots and lots of times, especially when it comes to like mapping things out. there's nothing worse than like getting left behind and then struggling. So just, you know, shout me. Oh, I didn't actually say my name. So my name is Becky. Well, you can't actually shout me, but you can use that live chat and I will help you as much as possible. It's so weird doing it back online again because we've been back in venues and it's all very nice. And yeah, I forget that on YouTube I can't actually hear you guys. So yes. So if you have done your background and you're just waiting for me to sort of finish up, then I would take a little step back from your background, take a photo of it, and then once you've done that, take a closer look and make sure you filled all the little dots of the canvas and it's completely covered. And if you want to add any other colours in, you can do that now. But I think that's pretty much done with the background. I don't want to overwork it. So I'm going to give my big brush a good rinse in the water, and I'm going to top up my palette with a bit more white paint. So this next little bit is just paint the whole dog in white. So it's quite nice to actually do this while the background's still a little bit wet, just because in the white fur, it's when like white fur is in the shadow, it kind of has a slight blue tint to it. So to make white fur look darker, we want to add a bit of blue. So we're going to add the next step while the backgrounds are still relatively wet. So give your brush a good rinse, top up your white if you need to, and we're going to start by just mapping in a really rough shape, like a starting point. So we're going to fill this whole shape from the top of the head all the way down to like the chest bit here in between the legs. So it looks like it's like a leaf shape, like this, going all the way down. And then we flatten off the top where the head's going to be, and we flatten off the bottom. And that's the starting point. So I would start about a good like third of the way down, just so that we don't start too high, otherwise we won't have any space for the crown to go. Like I just about managed to get my crown in. So definitely a third of the way down, if not a little bit lower, because you can always make this bigger if you need to, but it's much harder to make things smaller. So before the background dries up too much, grab a little bit of white paint on your big brush. So I'm not changing brushes, I'm just giving it a little rinse, and I'm going to dip it straight into the white paint. And then when you're ready, we're going to go, it's just to the left of halfway across the canvas. So halfway across is about here. That's roughly where the crown's going to be starting. So I'm going to go just to the left of halfway and about a third of the way down. And I'm going to start with a little dot, just so that it's a bit easier to start rather than going straight in with the full shape. Just do a little marker, then we'll do another little marker in a minute, and then we'll just join it up. So it's basically like a big dot to dot. So the second dot is going to be a bit closer towards the bottom edge of the canvas, and it's vertically in line. So line up your, sort of like, if you use a hand that's not got the paintbrush in, go to your dot that we've just done, move your hand down, and we're just going about an inch up from the bottom. So we just want enough space underneath the shape that we're going to do for the little legs to go. It's cute little paws. So yeah, these paws are sitting right on that bottom edge of the canvas. So if you've got a 16 by 20 inch canvas, which is what I've got here, the gap is roughly about 3 horizontal fingers. If you're working on something that's slightly smaller, like a 16 by 12, then you might want to just leave a gap of maybe 2 fingers, just because it'll be a little bit smaller. Or you can just leave a little gap. It doesn't matter too much about the measurements at this point, because yeah, it's just really, really basic shapes at the second. So that is the 2 dots. I'm just doing a little blob on the painting. And then what we're going to do is we're going to join it together. So I'm going to hold my brush. So I've got a nice vertical brush. I'm going to just drag a little dashed line to join up these 2 dots. So that is our centre line. It's going to go right down the middle of the Corgi's chest. And then we're going to add in our leaf shape. So it's pretty much like an open bracket on one side and a closed bracket on the other. And you don't want to make this too big just yet. So we're going to make it quite thin to begin with, and then we'll just gradually build it up. So I would keep your brush vertical, You might have a brush that has got a diagonal edge. So if you've got a big version of this brush, you'd always want your short bristles to be guiding the way. So if you have got a diagonal brush like this one, you want the long bristles pointing upwards so that when you drag it down, it just flows much easier. But I've got a flat brush, so I've got my brush just vertically, and I'm going to do a little open bracket line. I'm doing it quite sketchy, so I'm not just doing a straight, like full-on line. I'm just tapping the canvas, really rough, nothing too perfect at the second. So I've got a little like leaf shape, and I'm going to fill it in. So it's much easier to make things symmetrical if you just do like little bits at a time, and it's easier to see the shape properly when it's filled in. So when you're filling it in, you can turn your brush horizontally, so we're using it exactly the same way as we did our background, but we're using like the width of the brush, but I'm doing the brush strokes going down just to give like the direction of the fur. So just flicking it downwards, short choppy brush strokes, so there's like lots of overlapping dashes. And we've got something that looks like a leaf shape. Okay, I hope you're all okay so far. If I'm going too fast, please do let me know. But yeah, do also just pause it and take your time with it. So we're just going to gradually make this a little bit thicker, and we're going to make the shape a little bit more. No, we're not going to change the shape yet. We're just going to make it a bit bigger, and then I'll explain the next bits afterwards. So the shape of at the top is quite flat, and we're going to go to like the left-hand side. So I'm just going to do about another brush width at the top. So I've got my brush horizontal. I'm going to the top of the leaf shape, and I'm just going to do another like brush stroke running down the left-hand side of what we have just done. So I'm using the brush slightly differently to the outline that we did before. So I'm just filling it in, making it a little bit wider to the left. So the whole bit at the top is a whole brush width. And then it comes out, we're just going around the outside, little flicks. And then on the right-hand side, it's pretty much exactly the same thing. So in total, at the top, although the other side gets covered up by the crown, the top of the head is roughly about 2 brush widths. Remember, if you're working on a bit smaller, if you're working on a smaller size, then you might want to make it just a little bit smaller. But it's a very, very rough start. Things will definitely change as we move on through the painting. Right, I think it's looking very Corgi-like already. So take a little photo, and yeah, this is definitely one of those ones where you kind of have to just trust the process and know eventually it will look something like a dog, hopefully. So yeah, when you're ready, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in the ear. So the ear, you don't want it to be too big. I would, again, start quite small, and it's all the same techniques that we have just been doing. So we'll start with a dot to mark in where the edge of the ear is going to go. Then we'll add in our vertical, well, it's going to be a diagonal line, but it's the middle line. So the straight line that goes from the tip of the ear into the head. Then we'll do like a closed bracket line and an open bracket line, and we'll build it up. So it's literally lots of repetition within this painting, which is quite good because it's yeah, it gets a little bit easier as we're going through. So I've got my brush tilted to the top left corner. It's that kind of angle, it'll be slightly lower, and I'm going to add in a diagonal line, which is going to start just a couple of centimeters below the top of the leaf shape that we've got. So I'm going to pull my brush down slightly lower from the top. I'm going to add a little dash just coming out from the side of the head. There's a little dash here. So the top of the ear pretty much comes down about a quarter of the way down from the top. So if you look at your canvas, look at halfway down, and then you want to half that again. And that's kind of where the ear goes to. Sorry if you can hear my dog crying outside. She doesn't like it when the doors are shut. She's just sat outside crying, waiting to come in. So yeah, apologies if you can hear her. So yeah, find a quarter of the way down, and this is just sitting slightly in from the edge. So in terms of like distance, it's about a finger width, roughly. So quarter of the way down, a finger width in from the edge. I'm doing another little dot, and I'm going to join up those two dots together. A little diagonal line. I love these sorts of paintings. Oh, she is she kind of looks a bit like a corgi, but she's a Bulgarian shepherd mixed with a dachshund. So she's got yeah, she's got a proper like big head and a big like furry collar, and then two little legs. She's hilarious, and she's got like a big curly tail as well. But yeah, she's very cute. So have we all got something that looks a little bit like this at the second? If we do, then that's fantastic. Then we're going to add in the edges of the ear. So I'm going to add in, if you tilt your head on its side, that's where we've got the open bracket and closed bracket shape coming in. So we're just doing a little dash on the left, a little dash on the right. And remember to fill it in. So I'm doing quite a small ear to start with, so I'm not making these lines too curved. And then I'm filling it in. And then obviously the shape of the ear is going to be very different later on. We're literally just going to get the basic structure in first, and then we'll make it look nice later. So that is that little bit that we've done now. We're going to add the outside bits and join it all in later. Then what we're going to do next is we're going to add in the left leg, this little bit in here. Then we'll add in the right leg. Then we'll add in the bum and the back leg of the tail. So we'll just work our way across the body. So at the bottom of the canvas, right on that bottom edge, we're going to add in like a little, it's like half a closed bracket. So if you think of the closed bracket being like a full half circle sort of shape, we're just doing it from halfway down. So it just goes straight down and it's got a little flick. And that's going to be where the paw is. So it's sitting kind of in line. So if you look at where your ear is touching the head, that middle bit here, that's about the same distance that you want the leg to be starting on the body. So what I would do is just use your hand or your fingers, measure the distance that you've got from the top of your head to the middle of your ear, like this bit here, and then keep your hands as it is, go down to the bottom of the body, and we want to do a little dash just to the left side. And then it just means that everything like lines up quite nicely. And then from here, that's when we're going to do our half a closed bracket line. So I'm going to keep my brush horizontal. So I'm getting a nice thick line. And we're going to go from inside the body, like this little bit in here. And then it flicks slightly out to the left-hand side. And it touches the bottom of the canvas. I think the main thing for this is I don't want anyone to panic. I feel like with a lot of the animal ones, we get to these really odd stages and everyone's like, how is this ever going to look like a dog? But it all starts to come to shape when we add in the brown. So we've got a little while to go yet. But yeah, so take another little picture when you've got the leg in. The right-hand side leg is going to be a very similar kind of brush strokes. We're using the width of the brush. And what we're going to do is we're going to start quarter of the way down the leaf shape. So find halfway, then we're going to about quarter of the way down. So you find half, it's about here, and then a quarter is halfway up that again. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to run the brush along the outside of the body. When we get to halfway, we can very slightly pull the brush to the right side of the leaf shape. So it's following down the side first, then halfway it pulls out to the right slightly. So that's the kind of shoulder bit that's coming out on the right. and it's just about the width of the brush. From here, we're going to follow the shape of the body, so it's going to go all the way down like this, and then when we get in line with where the leg starts on the left side, we're going to pull it straight down, and it's just right at the very bottom that it flicks slightly to the left again. So pretty much just doing an outline of the leaf shape, and then when you get in line with the leg, you want to pull it straight down and out. It might be worth adding more paint to the brush on these bits, just so that you can see where the separation is. I'm going to go over that one more time, just making that paint a little bit thicker. And from here, we're going to add in the rest of the body. So it just keeps going down on a bit of a slope, and this is where it starts looking a little bit more seal-like, apart from this bit. And we're going to follow on from where we've started the shoulder. So it's roughly about halfway down the body. I'm going to do another brush stroke just to the right-hand side. So every time we do a new little layer, we're just working one little bit further out. And this is going to go down on a diagonal like this. It's going to be the slope of his bum. It's going to come round and back in. So we're literally adding in like it's like a quarter of a circle. So it comes down on a diagonal, and then just before we get to the edge of the canvas, we pull it round and in again. So it needs to go in line. So the bottom of the bum is sitting in line with the bottom of the chest. So you want to be pulling it down, and then when you get roughly in line with that leaf shape down here, you pull it across, and then we can fill that in. So I'm going to do my brush strokes going downwards. So the gap that I've got on that right-hand side is roughly about 2 vertical finger widths, roughly about there. You want a little bit of space. I might have gone a little bit far. You want a little bit of space for the tail. So I'm going to lift that up a little bit more. I'm just going to make it a little bit more of a diagonal first. So it might be worth, once you've done that shape, just taking a little step back, making sure that it's not too horizontal. It needs to be a nice little slope. And I'm filling in. I'm leaving a very small gap just between where the leg is and the rest of the body, just so that we can kind of see the different shapes. And then we've got a little tail to add in. So the tail is starting just above like the halfway point on this bottom bit here. So where you've got this half a circle curving round, you want to go halfway up. So it's this little patch in here, halfway up, and we're just adding in another little curved line that follows the shape of the body. So it's going out, almost touching the edge of the canvas, and flicking inwards. I don't think they've got that much of a long tail, so I might make that a little bit shorter. There we go. And now it's starting to look a little bit more corgi-like, which is very exciting. Kind of. I think it's because you don't see the other ear. At this point, I think if it had the other ear, it might look a bit more dog-like. But yeah, we've kind of got it roughly mapped out. Remember, when we add the fur over the top, it is going to like slightly shift. At least we've got the basic structure of where things are going to be placed. So from here, we are going to need to add in his foot, which is just this little patch just in here. So it's just to the left of the tail. And then we can roughly get in the shape of the crown. So we'll just pop in a little dash, just so we've got a bit of an idea of where it's going to sit. And then we'll start putting the colours in. So the foot is going to sit just in this little gap that we've got between the tail and the body. And it's a really tiny little flick of the brush that goes to the left. So we're running down the right hand side of the body, and it flicks round to the left. It's literally the same shape as the tail. It's kind of got like two bits going on down there. And then I'd give your brush a little rinse in the water. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop in a bit of an idea of where the crown's going to go. So I'm hoping that you're all okay so far. Do let me know if there's any measurements you want me to go back over or anything like that. If you're ready for the next little bit, we need to add in the diagonal line for the crown. So we're going to have the brush on a diagonal ready to go, and I'm going to start literally overlapping that top right corner of the leaf shape, and it's going to be a very slight diagonal line, and you can make the crown as big as you want. What do you mean the brush wet? Yet you want to dip the water, dip the brush into the water, and then pick up a little more white paint. So I've not actually used my tissue yet at all, because I've wanted the paint to be nice and like creamy all the way through these bits. So yeah, you can make the crown as big. Oh, the paint on the canvas. Yes. Yeah, I think the background should be dry by now. But if it's still wet, that should be absolutely fine, because we're going to add another layer of white on the crown later anyway. We're just doing a bit of mapping. So I'm going to pop in a little diagonal line. It's going to run off the edge like this. So we're going to add in the rest of the face with the dark colours later. So it's just like a little diagonal line, roughly about the size of a hand. So I've put my diagonal line just overlapping that top corner of the leaf, and it's on a slight diagonal, roughly about the size of a whole hand, including the thumb as well. Okay, so the next little bit is to add in the puffy bit for the crown, this little bit in here. So it's just a really rough like dome shape. So from the little diagonal line that we've got, I'm going to keep the brush horizontal. But it's on that same like diagonal, but I'm using the brush widthways. So I'm going to add in like a big, it's almost like a full circle, but it's got that flat bottom bit. So I'm going to go out, straight up to the side, and all the way around, and in. I'm going to fill that in. So it just means that when we add the purple later on, it's going to be really nice and bright against the background. So I've gone up roughly about 3 horizontal fingers below the top. So you just want to make sure you've got a little bit of space for the golden bits to go around. So you don't want to do this too close to the top edge of the canvas. And it's quite wobbly as well. So it's not like, well, it kind of looks like a chef hat at the second. So it's got a little bit of like a wobbly line going all the way around the edge. And we'll pop in just the outside bits. We're going to do these golden bits in white first, and then we'll move on to making it look a little bit more Corgi-like, which is, yeah, it's like a crucial part. I know it's quite weird looking at this little bit, but it's nice to get it all mapped out, and it'll be really satisfying when it starts taking shape. So the shape of the crown, the outside, is all quite angular. So going around the edge on that left-hand side, it goes quite vertical first, but following the edge of the shape that we've just put in. So it's going straight up. Then I've got a diagonal line and another one that goes into the top there. So I'm going to use the brush lengthways. So if you've got the diagonal brush, you want to be leading with your short bristles, dragging the long ones behind. Or if you've just got a brush like me, then you just need to hold it whichever way, as long as it's using it lengthways. And I'm going to go to the very edge of the shape that we've just done, and we're going to add in like an outline. So it's a little bit thinner. All these brush strokes are a little bit smaller. And when you're changing direction, so when you get almost to the top of that shape, I'm going to lift off the canvas, and I'm going to add in my diagonal line, which is going round to the right. Try not to touch the edge of the canvas just yet. I think it's quite nice to have a little bit of a gap. I'm going just below the top, and then it joins into a point in the middle of the crown at the top. So if you want to do a little marker in the centre at the top of the crown, then you can do, and then you've got a joining point. I'm going to do another dash, which joins up those bits together. And then you want to do the same thing on the other side. So try and keep it fairly symmetrical. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Like this one isn't perfect. This one's a bit thicker on this side. But yeah, we're going to add the gold over the top, like the golden colour. So things will definitely be able to move slightly and be adjusted if it doesn't go quite symmetrical to start with. So I'm going out to the right hand side. Keep looking at the other side just so you're keeping everything slightly lined up. Then we need to add in another diagonal line. So it's almost like a heart shape, like an angled cartoon heart going around. And then going into the point at the top. If at any point you want to switch to a slightly smaller brush as well, you definitely can do. So if you're finding that big brush is a little bit clumpy, it's all good. Switch to whichever one you feel easiest to use. And also, if you've got a slightly bigger rounded brush, some people prefer to use one of these ones. So you haven't got to worry about which way round to hold it. But yeah, everyone's different, so just have a go with all of them and see which one works best for you. So at the top of the crown, we have a little circle. So there's a nice, easy way to get a circle with these brushes. So if you've got a flatter brush, either an angled one or a straight edge brush, as long as it's like flat, a really easy way is to place your brush on the part where you want the circle to go, and you want to twist the outside edge of the brush all the way around, like the hand of a clock, like this. So it just twists all the way around, and the middle part of the circle sort of stays where it is. So that brush stroke just goes all the way around, and you end up with quite a nice little circle. Another way you can get circles in is to just dip your fingertip straight into the white paint and go straight in there. So if you do want to make it a little bit easier, you can just pop your fingertip on. That's all good. And then we're going to add one more little dot just on top. So it's got two circles on the top of the crown. There we go. So we've got a rough shape going on. We're definitely going to be adding lots of layers to this. So take another little picture, and I would recommend taking a step back. I feel like with painting, it's very easy to get very like sucked in to sitting really close to your painting, and it is impossible to kind of appreciate it as a whole picture. So every couple of minutes, just take a big lean away, or just even walk to the side of the room, have a little look at it, and it'll look like a completely different painting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the very top of the dog, and we're going to work our way down, just shaping it slightly. So we're adjusting the shapes very slightly to make it look a little bit more dog-like. Kind of looks a bit like Piglet at the second, like with these pointy ears. Like this bit's like seal, and this bit's like Piglet. But yeah, for the next little bit, I'm going to keep going with my big brush, but like I said, feel free to switch to a slightly smaller brush if that's a bit easier. And we're going to keep going with white. So the shape of the ear is more rounded. So we have got like a nice curve on the very end of the ear, and it joins into the head quite softly. So there's no like pointy bits in any point of this ear until we get to the golden brown colours. But we'll get to that later. So I'm going to start by just joining up the top corner of our leaf shape, which is the main part of the body, into the ear. So it's a nice smooth transition. So I'm adding in a little brush stroke that joins at the top of the ear with the top of the body, and then we can fill in that little gap of the background that's showing through. And I'm keeping the paint quite wet. If you're finding that, Amy, if your paint is still really, really thick on the canvas still, it might be worth just like wafting it a little bit. Because sometimes if you have like 3 layers or like more than 2 layers of wet paint on top of wet paint, it just tends to take the paint off. So yeah, the paint doesn't actually stick. So dry it a little bit, then you can add some more paint to it for this step. So when we've got that joining brush stroke that's like shaped the top of the ear, we can then round off the very tip of the ear as well. So I'm just keeping my brush nice and flat. So when I do this brush stroke, it's going to just curve round like a little C shape at the top of the ear. So the bottom of the ear is slightly different. So the top bit goes up and over nice and evenly. The bottom part comes down a little bit more of a, it's not vertical, but it's a lot more vertical than what we've already got. Oh yes, a hairdryer works perfectly. Definitely recommend having a hairdryer. So yeah, the bottom half is made up of 2 brush strokes. So we're going to add this diagonal line, which comes all the way down, and then just before we get to where it's supposed to join the head, we're going to add in a slightly more horizontal line. So if I bring this a little bit closer, I've still got my brush horizontal, and I'm dragging it down, so I'm just overlapping that brush stroke from before, making it slightly steeper. And then when we get to the base of the ear, I'm going to curve it in a little bit more sharp. And then where it joins into the head, rather than going straight across, it's got a slight curve to it, so it all flows quite nicely in. And just by changing the shape of the ear, I feel like that's made a big difference. There we go. So yeah, is everyone all okay? Amy, how's it going in general? We all good so far? And did everyone have a good Jubilee weekend as well? Like, we're doing a Jubilee painting. I've not mentioned it once. It was so nice having that 4-day weekend. So good. Shame about the weather though. We had like 1 day of really good weather and the rest was like completely raining. Although it was quite nice though, like having days off, just sitting with the rain outside. Okay, so taking a little picture of your canvas when you've done the ear, then we're going to work down the left side. So we're going to get the shape of like the head and the chest, making the leg look a little bit more like a leg rather than this. So I'm going to keep going with the big brush and I'm going to pop it into the white paint. Still got a little bit of water on there just to keep it nice and fluid. So the shape of the face at the top, like this is a lot more flat than it is rounded, like that leaf shape. So from where the ear has joined in with the side of the head, I'm going to make that a little bit sharper. Just in there. We need to add in a slight flat line. So I'm going to drag the brush straight down where the ear meets the head. Like this line could be a little bit more diagonal. So I've got this. Get that a little bit more of a, like that. There we go. So it's just a little bit softer where it joins into the body. So I've got a little vertical line, which is going down here. This is like the shape of the head. Then where we've got the curve of the leaf, we can emphasize that a little bit more. So we've just done this little tiny dash in here. Then we've got the curve of the leaf, but I'm going to make it even sharper on the curve. So it's going to go out slightly wider, and we can actually get a couple of brush strokes in for the fur. So as I'm doing this bit, I'm going to flick the brush out on a diagonal. I'm doing little dashes. So I'm lifting it off the canvas every single time. So every single time I'm doing it, it's like dragging, lift off, overlapping the last one, and going back again. So that's going where we've got the chest here, and then we can blend it down. So I'm just closing the shape back into where the foot is going to be, at the leg. Oh, good. Thanks, Amy. Oh, you did. Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? The was it Louis doing all of his like faces. It's hilarious. Yeah. So we've got those little flicks going down the side, and we're just making them a little bit wider on the middle bit. And then the foot and the leg just needs to be a little bit more rounded, and it's slightly thicker. So we're going back over the leg. I'm going to round off his paw by just pushing the brush round and back up again. So it looks like he's got little socks on. So I'm just going to go back over this little bit because I feel like I was really unclear with what I changed on the ear. So where we've got those two diagonal lines on the ear, on this bit here, rather than going straight in, I've just made it a little bit less of a definite, like, two lines. Just a little bit softer as it joins in. There we go. And then for the right hand side. So this is like the last little bit that's going to finally bring the shape together. So on the right side, we're going to make it a little bit flatter. So we need to fill in this little gap that we've got underneath the crown. So I'm going to line up my brush, like lengthways, underneath the crown. And I'm going to make sure I've got a little bit of that crown overlapping the edge of the head. So if I bring this a bit closer, I'm still leaving a little bit of this little bit overlapping the head. So I'm going to bring my brush downwards, filling in the side of the head so it's a little bit thicker. And it's going to go out on a little bit of a diagonal to that right hand side. Oops, bring it back on the easel. It's going down like this. I'm just going to make it a little bit softer where it joins into where the shoulder is. I'm going to re-emphasize that shoulder in a second as well. So it's just flattening off that right hand side. And then we're going to go back over the shoulder. I'm going to make it a little bit wider as well. So I'm going to go back over this little section. I'm going to bring it further out to the right and make it a little bit more definite. So I've got a bit more paint on the brush. I'm going to widen it out and drag it in. So the shoulder is a good like 2 brush widths in size rather than just 1. And then that's also going to thicken up all the way down into the paw. So all the way down. So hopefully you can see those 2 brush strokes running next to each other. And then we're going to round off just like we did on the left-hand side one. So it's going to curve around. And 2 very cute little paws. See, it's starting to come together now. I like it when it gets to these stages because I feel like most people will hopefully relax. Is everyone relaxed? I hope no one's like really stressed. So the next, like the last bit that we're going to change on the shape, or not change, just go back over, is just to make his bum and his back just a little bit flatter. So it's a bit more definite between what's the tail, what's the leg, and what's the body and the tummy bit as well. So I'm going to go back over his back, and it's going to just come out a little bit sharper. So it's got that vertical line going down that right hand side. So rather than being more of a like a backward C shape or half a circle, we've got a slightly sharper bit where the leg's going to go. And we can make the leg a little bit more defined as well. So we're just doing like another layer of paint over the top. A slightly bigger paw. And a slightly more defined tail as well. And now we have a corgi on our canvas. So we can put the brush down for a second. The next thing that we'll be doing is we're going to be marking in all of the brown and like the golden colours. So we're going to switch to our smaller brush. It's still going to be the angled, this like middle brush. Just because it's a really nice way to get the brush strokes in, because it's not really overly detailed. So we're not adding in like every individual fur. We're using the width of the brush to make it look like more clumps of fur. Makes it a little more not abstract, but it's just not as realistic. So the colour is a bit of a tricky one to make. So I would just mix up the colour, and then I would do a tester of the colour on the canvas, see what it looks like, and you can always adapt it. And there's a few variations of colour throughout. So we start with like a nice like mid brown, and then we'll add some dark colours into it, so some more black, and then we'll go over the top with some white while it's still wet to get the lovely highlights. So let's add some white paint to a fresh part of the palette. And if you have got quite a lot of thick white and it's still quite wet, it might be worth giving your canvas a couple of minutes to dry, or use the hairdryer. Have a bit of a break as well. That was a lot of measuring and a lot of painting in quite a short space of time. So have a break, and then come back whenever you're ready. So I'm going to pop a little bit of water on my middle brush. I'm going to grab some white paint. I'm going over to a clean part of the palette. So I'm going somewhere near to where my yellow and my red is. And I'm going to pop in a little bit of yellow. So I'm just pulling over a little dash, mixing it with the white paint. So we've got a bright lemon yellow colour on our palette. From here, we're going to add a little bit of red. So we're aiming for a slight peachy colour. So if, like me, you add way too much red, then you need to add a bit more yellow back in. So it's an orangey peach colour. There we go. And then to tone it down, there's two colours that we can add to this. One is the black paint. Now you don't want to add too much black, because if the black is too much in the paint, then it can go very green, and it can also go like just a bit muddy. So we're going to pop a tiny bit of black into the colour. So I've literally just dipped the tiniest bit of the brush. Tiniest bit of the brush into the black paint. I'm going to mix it around. If it goes like instantly green, might do a little bit more. If it goes instantly green, then you might need to just top it up with a bit of red. And it makes it more of a brown colour. So we're just aiming for like a beige. The other colour that you can add that makes it a little bit more golden is a little bit of purple. So you can pop in a little dash of purple. If you don't have a pre-mixed purple, it is absolutely fine. It doesn't make that much of a difference at all if you've got it or not. But if you do have it, you might as well use it. So I'm going to pop a little bit more red backing, because I feel like that's still quite... I think that's a bit more of a beige colour. And then I'm going to pop a little bit more white back in, just to lighten it slightly. So we've got a mid beige And I'm going to scrape the brush on the side of the palette. So I'm literally just pulling the brush through like this. Because for this bit, you don't really want too much paint on the brush, because then you get a really nice like wispy effect. So what we'll do is we'll start with the ear, and then we'll just work our way down like we did when we were adjusting the shapes slightly. So the only bit that might just be a little bit tricky is just in the face. So we're going to fill most of it in, and then we'll redefine it with the white later. So don't panic. It will just look a little bit messy to start with. So we're going to go in the ear. So the whole ear isn't brown, it's just the outside bit. So the first brush stroke we're going to do is with our long bristles pointing to the top right corner. So we're pretty much lining up the length of the brush with the edge of the head, just somewhere about here. And we're lining up the longer bristles with the top of the ear as well. So it's sitting right in this top edge. From here, what we're going to do is we're going to add in an outline along the top of the ear. But just as we get a little bit along, I'm going to add a little curve like this. So we're just making a thick line at the start of the ear, and then it goes into a thin line. If you've got, if you haven't got a diagonal brush and you've just got a flat top brush, then that's absolutely fine. You're just doing the same thing. So you start with it using the width of the brush, and then you twist it, so you're just using the length of the brush. And then we can go around the rest of the ear, literally just adding in a thin golden line. The only other bit that gets a little bit thicker is when it joins back into the head again. So you can just press a little bit harder with the brush on this little bit at the bottom. And I feel like that's really like neat. So if you want to make it a little bit messier, a little bit wispier, I'm going to just do a couple more brush strokes, just a little bit shorter and flickier, still keeping the same like width, but I'm just blending it out slightly. I'm doing lots of dashy brush strokes just to make it a little bit messier. Hit my foot on my chair. Whew, that hurt. Okay, so the face then is kind of like a heart shape to start with, and we're going to just add in like this little shape up here. So it's not, is it a heart shape? Like the start of it is, to me, it looks like a heart shape. So we're going in the center of the head, and remember, because it's got a tilted head, the center is on a slight diagonal. So I'm going pretty much underneath where the crown is on the top of the head. And I'm going to add in a diagonal line that comes about halfway down the ear. So we find where the ear is, go back across. And then we're going to add in, this is the bit that looks like the top of a heart shape. We're going to go out to the left, adding like almost like eyebrows, adding it to the left-hand side and a little bit to the right. Careful not to go like on the crown. So we're just filling in then above that with this colour. I think my golden colour is very, very orange. So I'm going to add a little bit more white and black into it to make it slightly more grey. So you're finding that it's just really bright and you want to tone it down, then more white and black really helps to like make it a bit less vibrant. These little eyebrows. And then we're going to fill all the way down the left-hand side. So we're going to go underneath where the ears meet in the head, and I'm going to do little diagonal dashes running down that left-hand side of the body. And we want to stop just before we get to the legs. I'm going to go back over that in a second. So I'm keeping it really like short, choppy, nothing's like neat at this point. And with the flicks, I'm just flicking out of that white line slightly, so it's giving it a little bit of texture. And you can also flick inwards as well, so to make it look a little bit more like blended, you can definitely flick inwards as well. Okay, the next little bit is to define the legs slightly. So where you get to the leg, we're then going to add in a little diagonal line, which is going to shape the chest bit again. So where you can see that curved white line that we've pretty much covered up on this left side, we're going to just redefine that so it looks like the leg is sitting like behind the chest. Don't worry if it's quite thick, because we can go back over with the white later anyway. But yeah, we're just sort of highlighting with the brown the top of the leg and the foot. So I'm doing little downwards flicks. Going off bottom. The last little bit on the left-hand side for now is going to just be this little bit in here. So if you find halfway down your leaf shape, so the starting shape that we began with, halfway up, we're going to use that as a starting point to add in a slightly thicker patch of brown. So just above the halfway, so starting on halfway, and then we're pushing the brush upwards, we're going to bring the golden colour slightly further into the body. So we're getting that little shape in that. And if you haven't taken photos as yet, I would definitely recommend taking pictures at this point. And then we'll go down the right-hand side, and then we'll finish off with the face as like the last little bit with the golden colour. And then we'll go in with our dark colours, then we'll go over the white. And I think the very, very last little bit that we'll do is we're going to add in the eyes and the nose and the mouth. That's the very, very last step. So that's when it really comes together. So on the right-hand side, we're going to add in the little cheek line. So we need to go underneath the crown. So we're just filling in the whole section underneath where the crown's sitting. And we're going to hold the brush lengthways. So I've got my long bristles pointing up, or just a vertical brush. And I'm going to literally add in a little curved line that goes down the side of the face. And just before we get to where the shoulder is, or just a little bit higher than when the shoulder starts, I'm going to do a little flick inwards. So that's roughly where the cheek's going to sit. It's coming down, and I'm pulling it inwards. So we're not going too far in. I'm going to re-go over the white bits to get the cheeks and stuff all sorted. And then we're going to keep going around this bit. So we're going to leave the rest of the chest sort of as it is. So the next bit of brown is where the shoulder starts. So we're going a little bit lower down. Where we've got this curved line, just to the right of the cheek, a bit lower down, we're going to outline that right-hand side brush stroke. I'm going to do my flicks going down to the right-hand side. So we're pretty much just filling in that right-hand side line. Oh, little flicks. And we're stopping just about halfway down. So before it goes into like where the leg's going to start, we're stopping. Just because the colour changes quite a lot, so it goes into the white in this bottom half. And then we can make it a little bit more filled in, so it gradually gets wider as we get a bit lower down. So I'm starting at the top again, but as we're going a bit lower down, I'm going to widen up on that left side as well. So it's just giving a little bit more shape. So you can see the whole of that leg now. Okay, give the brush a little rinse. My colour's getting a little bit dry, so I'm going to rinse the brush. Add a bit more water back into the paint. It's gone very, very fuzzy. So if you're getting lots of little thin brush strokes where the paint isn't quite sitting onto the canvas as nicely as before, then just pop more water in. There we go. And then the rest of it is pretty much filled in, but I would leave little gaps in between each little section, just because it's going to get a little bit muddied if we completely fill it in. So I leave a very, very small gap just to the right of the leg, and I'm going to fill in where the tummy is. So I'm keeping my brush stroke going down to the right hand side, so it's constantly sort of, the brush strokes are going the direction of where the fur would be going. So it's going in that tummy bit. I've left that little gap in there. I'm going to do another brush stroke, and I'm filling in where the leg's going to go, and again I'm going to leave a little bit of gap just in between every single little section, and obviously for the tail as well. And then take another step back, take a photo, and breathe. We've got the base coat of the brown on there, and we've just got one last little bit to do to finish off like this top bit here. So the eyes, again, they're going to go back in later, but yeah, we're going to shape in a little, it's kind of like where the bags of the eyes are. So we're going to add in like a little W shape, which is going to go underneath, like opposite to how we did the heart shape at the top. So where you've got the little M shape, where the eyebrows are roughly going to be sitting, we're going to add in like a W shape. And we can fill in the gap, just so that we can kind of see roughly where the eyes are going to be going. So just adding in like 2 little lines. And hopefully you can kind of still see the eyebrow lines from before. If not, it's fine, but that's giving us an idea of where we're going to be re-putting in the white. So yeah, don't overwork that bit too much, because it's quite nice to have the paint separated slightly. Okay, give the brush another little rinse. We're going to make the colour slightly darker. So to make it darker, I'm going to add a little bit more red and a bit more black. And if you've got the pre-mixed purple, pop a little bit of purple in there as well. And I'm mixing on the same part of the palette as before, so a bit of red, a bit of black, and pop in a little bit of purple. And if it goes way too purpley, you can always add a little bit of yellow back in. So we're just aiming for a slightly darker brown colour. But I would recommend just adding in like little dots of black at a time. I wouldn't add in like a big brush load of black, just because it does change the colour quite dramatically. So I feel like that might be a little bit dark, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes on. It always looks really different on the palette than it does on the canvas. So when you've done a bit of colour mixing, I'd scrape the brush off so you've not got too much on there. And we're just going to pop in a couple of dark areas just so that we've got a bit of shading to make it look more realistic. So the first bit I'm going to do is just along the bottom edge of where we've put the golden colour in the ear. So I'm keeping my brush strokes really, really light, so I'm barely touching the canvas. Just tiny little flicks. A little bit just along the inside of the ear. I'm using the width of the brush for these bits. And we can define what's the head as well and what's the ear. So I'm just doing a little brush stroke along that left edge of the head. Okay, and then just adding in a few little bits, a little bit lower down. So we're just going to keep going with the diagonal brush stroke. So like we did going down that whole left-hand side, so my brush is going down and up, just little flicks. And these slightly darker patches. And we can also just highlight the bottom or add shadows to the bottom of that W shape that we've added in. So I'm doing another little flick of the brush, just running along that bottom edge. This bit will all make sense later. I know it looks really odd, but yeah, it will all come together. When we add in the rest of the white and the nose and everything, it will look fabulous. So then we can redefine like these bits in here. So where we've got the slightly wider patch of beige, I'm going to add some slightly longer brush strokes, still using the width of the brush, but yeah, all different lengths as well. So as I'm doing this, I'm trying to make it quite messy. What tends to happen sometimes, we're always trying to be so like neat all the time. And in terms of like painting, especially when it's a dog, the brush strokes need to be like overlapping and all different lengths to make it look like he's not got perfectly straight hair. I mean, if it is like the Queen's Corgi, he's probably had like a lovely blow dry, but I'm going to make my Corgi just a little bit more messy. So I'm trying to not overthink these brush strokes too much. So I'm just sort of adding the shading to the right side of that patch, and we can then go right round and add a bit of shading to the top of the leg as well. So I wouldn't panic too much either. If there is a big difference between your first colour and your shadow colour, don't worry too much, because we have got the white to go back over the top as well. So we're going to make the colour really, really light, and we'll do like a whitewash over the top almost to get these highlights in. And that will be that mid colour to blend all of those shading bits. So on the right hand side, there's just a little tiny bit of shading just underneath where the crown is sitting. So we can add a little bit of a like redefining where we had the eyebrow shapes in earlier. So we can do a little dash. Literally looks like we've just drawn an eyebrow now. Yeah, just a little bit on that right hand side, so it's just a little bit darker. And then we can go along that right cheek as well. And I'm literally just tapping away, not pressing too hard at all. So the next little step is literally just going into all those little gaps that we've left on this side. So in between the leg and the stomach, we need to use this dark colour to really show that the stomach is sitting like behind the leg and the leg is in front. So I'm doing this brush stroke just a little bit sharper. So I'm running the brush just alongside the leg, and then you can add those flicks just to blend it out a little bit. So yeah, you're kind of like outlining it first, and then the brush strokes are going down towards that bottom right corner because that's the direction of the fur. So little flicks going this way. And then a little bit of a filled in bit. So wherever you've got the white still showing through, apart from also the feet, you need to leave those white. But yeah, in the little gaps, that's where there's really dark shadow colours are going to be sitting. And then we can go back over our tail. And the tails are quite dark normally, so I'm going over that whole tail with that colour. Apart from the little white tip. So I'm moving that as it is. So take another little picture, take a step back. Hopefully having those shading bits in has really helped to bring the legs forward and make it look a little bit more 3D. The last little step for the brown fur for now is going to be adding in, oh actually, hang on, we can add a little bit of shading to the shoulder. Before we add the highlights, let's just add one tiny little bit of shading just on the side of the shoulder. So I'm taking off more paint. There's barely anything on there. It's just at the top, a little bit on the right, and a little bit on the left edge as well. So it's just where the white fur is going to be like overlapping later. And again, the brush strokes on that side are always going down to the bottom right corner. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, rinse off the brush a little bit, and we're going to pop quite a bit of white into that brown colour. So I'm adding a big blob of white straight over the top of the brown. I wanted to go a little bit grey, so that it doesn't, yeah, I don't know what I was going to say. We're just adding loads of white to that colour. I'm going to scrape it off. The highlights, we can actually start making the brush strokes a little bit more defined. So we can use the brush lengthways for some of these bits, especially on like the face. So I'm going to use the brush lengthways just on where his like snout's going to be starting. So in between where his eyebrows are going to be, I've got the long bristles pointing down, and I'm just doing lots of little flicks going upwards into where his like forehead is, and then up and out. So the brush strokes go upwards and they fan out when you get to this top half of the head. And they can keep going around, so like feathering round. Little dashes. Probably go a little bit lighter. Kind of looks like a Furby. I knew it was looking like something. Like this bit at the second looks very, very Furby-like. Knew it. Okay, so we can keep going with the highlights. I'm going to go down the left side of the shoulder. So overlapping some of those shadows and overlapping some of the lighter colours. So I'm mostly going down that left side, but the brush strokes can overlap a little bit, and it just helps to do a bit of blending. So for all of these bits, I'm using the brush lengthways. So if you have got a diagonal brush like mine, then you just want to be leading with the short bristles and just doing really tiny little flicks. We also need a little bit of highlight in the ear as well. So just going around the outside, any part that's like, yeah, not full shadow, you can add these highlights to. So I'm just doing little dashes going around. So I think this shadow in here is quite dark. So where I've got my ear, I'm going to just go back over that a little bit just to slightly soften it, because that was quite a dark shadow. And then we can go over onto the right hand side. So the main highlights on the right are going to be on this right hand side edge of the shoulder, like this patch in here. So I've got my long bristles to the top left corner. So I have to really think about which way I'm holding the brush. Long bristles to the top left, and I'm just going over that edge of the leg. We can have a couple of little brush strokes going a little bit further over. No worries, Amy, that's a very important part of the day. I totally understand. So yeah, if you do get too carried away with the highlights or the shadows, you can just go back in with the colours over and over again. So the really good thing with acrylics is that they're so forgiving, and if you do want to experiment with a different colour, or yeah, if you just feel like you want to adapt it slightly, then you can just paint over it lots of times and it's all good. So I've just, I'm going to add some highlights then on the tummy as well. So it's a very small bit in this middle part of the tummy. And then lots of highlights to the back leg as well. So I'm definitely going to go back along like the top of the back line because that needs to be a little bit brighter. So this is just mostly giving texture as well. So any bit that's looking a bit flat still, just make it really messy, lots of little dashes. And you can always add more white into it as well. So if it's getting too much of like just one colour and it's not really defining anymore, just put more white on the brush. And I feel like where you've got the tail, that bit does need to be quite light. Like the leg next to the tail, not the actual tail, just because that looks really nice and separate. I've got a very like squeaky chair that keeps rubbing on the side of the leg of the table, just so you know. And then yeah, the one last little bit I've just noticed is he's got a really hefty shoulder. He looks like he's doing this. So I'm gonna just go back in with a slightly darker brown from before and just make this a little bit less bendy. I'm just like softening his little shoulder bit on the side there. Okay, right. I think I'm happy with that now. I really, really hope that you guys are all okay. The next little step is to go in with the white paint. So this is going to really help to brighten up all of this and make it look a bit more like less see-through. So we're not going to completely cover the whole of the body because, like I said, it's quite nice to have some of the blue showing in the bits of the shadow. So like in the sides of the chest at the bottom, we're leaving a little bit of the blue showing through. But yeah, this is going to look really nice to like overlap some of the shadow colours and just blend it all together. So you want a little bit of clean white on your palette, and any bit of your painting, sorry, not any bit of painting, any bit of the dog that is white, we're pretty much going to be adding thick white paint to it. So I'm going into the water, I'm giving it a little tap. This is the first time I've used my tissue, just giving it a little tap, just because I think for this bit, it's quite nice for it to be quite thick and textured. And I'm going to start in the ear. I'm going to add a big blob of white to the brush, and I'm just adding lots of little flicks inside the ear. And you can overlap a little bit of the brown so that it's looking nice and fluffy. And don't worry, if you can still see that blue showing up, like I said, it adds the shadow as well. And later on, we're going to add a little dash of purple. So it does not have to be totally white. And then we're going to go and add in a little bit of where the nose and the eyebrows are going to be sitting. So I'm going to start by adding in a bit of the, what's this bit called? The snout. Yeah, the snout. So I'm going to add in a little diagonal line in between the eyes, and it opens out into, it's like a water droplet shape. So it goes round into a little water droplet, and it kind of goes down as low as where the chin is. So everyone's might be slightly different at this point, just because everyone's chins might be in slightly different places, and that's totally fine. But it's a really rough little water droplet shape, and we will obviously add to that later. So either side of that, we can fill in like the cheeks, so we can just do a few brush strokes in the white bits either side. If you need to reshape slightly, so the brown was quite thick on my cheeks, so I'm going to go over the top a little bit with the white, making it nice and soft and nice and blended. And I'm leaving a very, very small gap around roughly where this snout's going to be, just because we're going to add grey later. But yeah, I'm just filling that bit in. And now, like around it. Those nice curvy cheeks. And then we can add in the nice big fur on his chest. So I'm going to do slightly bigger, thicker brush strokes. And there's quite a nice like pointy bit of white which separates the head from the chest. So just where you've got that snout bit that we've roughly added in, I'm going to make the white overlap the brown a little bit further on that side. So my brush strokes on the left are going out to the left-hand side, and the brush strokes on the right are going out to the right-hand side. So then we can just go over and over these bits until we're happy with the amount of white that we've got on there. And I'm literally just tapping and dragging down. So the brush strokes in the center of the chest are going to be quite vertical. And then, like I said, either side are going out to the side. And it just makes it more 3D, so you can really see that it's coming forward and round. So definitely like on where the white is meeting the brown, you want the white to be overlapping. So I'm lifting off the canvas just as the white goes over the top of the brown. And I'm going to bring my chest down slightly. I think I've not quite gone down low enough my chest. So I'm going to add the white just a little bit lower. I'm leaving a little bit of white, the blue either side, just so it really has that shadow. I'm constantly topping up the brush with more white. So for this bit, the paint is a lot thicker than what we've been using before. And right underneath the chin, or what will be the chin, and on this right-hand side, you really want to be overlapping those beige shoulder bits. And definitely try not to overthink it. I know that's easier said than done, but literally just filling in a lot of the white and just softening any bits where the beige is. And we can go over the paws as well, so make those paws nice and bright. Back over the legs, these bits. All the same brush strokes, so I'm using the length of the brush. And on the leg as well. So I'm not going to add any white highlights to the tummy because that will be quite dark. So I'm mostly doing it on the, actually I think a bit more on the, classed as like the elbow, the dog's elbow. Dogs have elbows? Or would that be classed as a knee if it's a leg? I don't know. I'm going to call it an elbow. This little fluffy bit on the leg. And then the back leg will probably have quite a lot of highlight as well. So I'm going actually on top of the beige with my white again. And obviously brightening up his foot as well. And his tail needs a nice little white tip as well. Okay. And breathe, everyone. We have got something now that looks hopefully nice and dog-like. If you're not sure about anything or if it's not looking dog-like at all, do let me know. And if you also want to send a photo, you can send a picture through like Facebook as well, because that's quite a good way for me to be able to see if anything's gone a bit wrong. But I'm sure they're looking good. I'm really excited to see these. So when I've said about taking pictures, I would love for you to share them with us. Obviously, we're not finished just yet. We have got the crown to go and just the features really. So the main bulk is there. So I'm hoping that you're feeling positive. So we're going to get the crown on. We're going to leave this to dry for a minute or two. The crown is super, super easy. So you've done all the hard bits now. And I promise the features are really simple too. So yeah, have a break if you need to. But the crown, we're going to start with the purple. So if you haven't got a pre-mixed purple, you want to be mixing a little bit of red and blue together with a little bit of white. If you've got the brush party colours, for some reason the red and blue, they tend to make a slightly more greyish brownish purple as opposed to a really bright purple. But adding that little bit of white helps to make it quite lilac. So I'm going to keep going with my middle brush, my middle angled brush, and I'll show you the difference between the colours. But either is absolutely fine, so do not panic if you've not got the purple. It's a really nice colour actually with the white mixed in to the red and blue. So if you have got a pre-mixed purple, pop a little bit of white into it just to lift it slightly. And I'm going to pop this purple on that big chef hat bit that we started with. So this big circle shape, and I'm using nice big, thick, wide brush strokes, just filling it in. If you have got the red and blue, you can mix red and blue together. I would say more red looks better. So red and blue, and then a blob of white, and you get it's just a bit more of a pastel purple actually, so it's still a nice colour, it's just different. So this is the purple, we put the white and red. So yeah, it's more like a plum purple actually, that colour, which is quite nice. You could use that as like a shading colour. So I'm going to do a little bit of both. And then we'll do the highlights with some pink actually. So we're literally filling in this whole shape with one shade of purple to start with. My colour's gone very dark and a bit more white into it. And I'm keeping the brush strokes light, although I'm doing quite big, thick brush strokes. I'm not going to over blend. So if there's any bits where the colour has shifted slightly in shade, I'm not going to blend it out too much. I'm not smoothing out those brush strokes either because it looks like it's nice material and it's like quite textured. So when you've done those bits, we're going to add some highlights in. Also, that's not really light, isn't it? Yeah, the highlights are with pink. So I'm going to mix red and white together, or if you have a pre-mixed pink, then you can use that as well. So the highlights are going to be sitting on this top bit. So you want to do it while it's still a bit wet, because then it blends quite nicely. So red and white. I'm going for like a nice mid-pink. I've not really cleaned off the brushes actually, because it's quite nice for this to blend. But I'm just adding in like little two lines. So one's going out to the side, the other one's going down. And I'm doing lots of those 2-part brush strokes just to make it look like it's quite 3D. Oops. Going out to the side and down. So it's kind of following the shape of the crown outline a little bit. Kind of. I'm leaving little gaps in between, just so it looks like there's like folds in the material. But if you wanted to add some shading as well, if you wanted to really push the boat out, you can make your colour slightly darker. So you could add a bit more of like the purple, and you can go in the gaps. And that's quite nice as well. It just brings out the definition between the two colours. Or you could mix more blue into your purple if you had the red and the blue mixed together. So I'm not going to overwork that too much. We do need to let that dry before putting in all the gold bits. So take another little breather, We're going to go with the facial features, get the last little bits on the face done, and then we're going to put the gold colours on top. I was going to finish with the features, but I think if we get them on now, it means it gives us plenty of time for the purple to dry. If you've got any like metallic gold as well, feel free to use that on your crown because that would look really, really nice. I don't know if I've got any here. I do. So I can show you a little bit of gold. Because it's quite, if you've got the brush patty gold, it's really nice. It's not too sparkly, it's just more of like a shimmer, which looks quite nice. So yeah, feel free to add a bit of gold later on. Or you could actually add it into the fur as well, if you wanted to. Depends how glitzy you want to go. Okay, let's go in with the we're going to start with the nose first, then we'll add the eyes in, just because the nose is nice and central, and once the nose is in, it's much easier to see if the eyes are even or not. So we're going to do it all in black first. So I'm going to dip. Oh, also I've switched brushes. I'm using a really small number 6 rounded brush. So it's the smallest of the 3 that we have been using. And when you're picking up paint on a round brush, you want to just roll it on its side so that it keeps the brush on a nice point. And I'm adding a little bit of water into it like this, just so it's a little bit more fluid. So the nose is sitting right in the middle of that water droplet shape that we added in that was really rough. And remember, because he's got a tilted face, he's tilted slightly, the nose needs to be tilted as well. So we're going to start with it just being a circle, and then we flatten off the bottom and the top bit. So I'm starting with a little dot, and it's sitting in the widest part of the snout water droplet shape, and it's kind of halfway down the cheek, if that helps. This little bit here. So we're starting with a dot first, just because it's easier to make things bigger gradually than starting with an outline and then trying to fill it in, especially when it's black. Yeah, just try and keep it quite small. So we're going to make this gradually slightly bigger, one step at a time. So if you're working on the same size canvas as me, which is a 16 by 20, mine's roughly the size of a 50p coin, I think, or about just about 2 finger widths, roughly. So I'm just pressing it, making it a little bit bigger either side, very slightly. And then when you've got the size of the circle, we need to flatten off the top and the bottom. So the top bit needs to be on a diagonal. I'm going to bring this a bit closer. So we're not flattening off. Okay, so if you think of it like a clock face, we're flattening off between 12 and 10, because that is the angle of his face. And then the bottom bit will be flattened off between 6 and 4. Okay, from there, make sure it's a nice even circle though. Although it's tilted, it needs to be quite symmetrical still. Okay, and then the mouth is just a little triangle first. We're literally going to add in a little triangle and then a little flick either side. So the triangle is sitting just on the base of the nose. So if it's if you look at the shape, like the angle of the face, it needs to be flowing nice and diagonally. And we're going just below the base of the nose, and we're adding in like a little rounded triangle shape about for where the mouth is going to sit. And that takes us down to the bottom of the water droplet shape. We're so close to having a corgi with a crown on its head as a painting. I think it's so cute. So the last little bit for the mouth is just to add in like 2 little flicks either side. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to round off the bottom of that triangle slightly. I'm going to leave a very small gap, and I'm just going to add in a little tiny flick, almost like a little smile on that side, and a little bit on the right. So it's a little bit straighter on the right hand side, and if you start a bit further away and drag inwards, then he's got a slight open mouth as well. Looks quite cute. And then for the eyes, they start off as circles, and then we'll add in. So I'm going to bring this a bit closer so you can see these details. So we've got the eyes are going to be fully black first, and then we'll add in these moon shapes of brown when it's dry. So the shape of the first one is going to sit just in the circles. The first one's kind of like, this one's a bit lower on this one. I would find the center point of your circles that we've got. So underneath where you've done your eyebrows is where everyone's might be slightly different. And we're literally sitting in the center. So I'm starting with 2 dots like that. Right in the center. And just use your brush to line things up so it's pretty much vertically in line with the edges of the mouth. So use your brush, keep it all on an angle. Remember, the head is tilted, so the one on the right is going to be slightly higher than the one on the left. And then we're going to make them into little circles. So the size of this one's roughly about the size of a 5p coin. But remember, if you're working on something smaller, just make it a little bit smaller. And you can always make it bigger afterwards. So I'm just pressing and twisting the brush around. And I think the harder you press with this bit, the neater the circle is. If you do little dashes, that's when it goes a little bit messy. So press it, be nice and just confident with the brush stroke. Swivel it round. But the shape of them, the end shape isn't actually a circle. They have got slightly more like a human-ish eye shape. So they just point, slightly more like a rugby ball shape. So they point slightly on the halfway mark either side. So we've got little slightly pointy bits on the outsides. Just try and keep them the same size if possible. Cool. So we're now going to go in with all of the gold and the bits on the crown. Then we can go in with the final bits on the eyes. So to make the gold, if you've not got a gold, to make it you just need a bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and a little bit of black. Or if you've got that premix purple, then you can use the purple as well, because that does help to make it quite golden. So it's definitely quite a nice peachy colour first, so yellow and red. And then a little, more, the main colour is yellow. And there's a little bit of red, and then the tiniest bit of black. A little bit more yellow in there. And we're going to paint over the outside parts of the crown. So I'm going to go over the circle, over the white lines that we've done on the side. And it also needs the gold rim just above where the the white line is. No. Now, if your purple hasn't quite dried, I would leave it for a couple of minutes to dry, or use a hairdryer. But we do need to add a straight line that goes from the bottom of the circle all the way down to add in that front line. Like that. And then before that dries, we need to add in the white highlights. So I'm going to dip my brush straight into the white paint. I've not cleaned it up or anything like that. I'm just going to go back over these gold bits, but adding in a nice big, thick blob of white to the, like, anywhere that looks like it needs a highlight, really. So down like the center line, like right in the middle. I've just started at the top, just a little dash going down the middle. And then on these diagonal lines on the crown at the top. And then you can add in a little pattern. So on this one, it's just made up of like little dashes and swirly lines to make it look like there's lots of like jewels and details. Obviously, you can go in with a small brush and make it really like refined, really detailed. I quite like the messy look. So I'm just going to do lots of little dashes, like little shapes. If you want to make it look like, kind of looks like a bit like, yeah, like another leaf shape. If you've got a flat brush, you can literally just tilt it on a diagonal and then press, and you get a nice shape nice and quickly. But yeah, like little dots, little wiggly lines. And then you can add lots of little white dots for like gems and jewels and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to do lots of little dots going up the side of the crown. So you can use the wooden part of the brush to get dots in, or you can use your small rounded brush, or you can use the long edge of your diagonal brush. And if you need to add a second layer of white onto your base of the crown, I don't know what to call that bit, then we can do something. Add a bit more white to the brush. I'm going to go over this bit. So where it's sitting on the corgi's head, that needs a nice bright white line, because otherwise it gets a bit lost. Okay, and then final 2 steps. We've got 2 little tiny steps. Oh, actually, apart from a little bit of purple in the ear as well, because that'll look quite nice. We can add a little bit of white to the points in the eye. So the highlights, they're quite big. They're sitting in the top half of the eye, just to the left. So actually I'm going to use the wooden end of the brush. I'm just dotting in a nice big highlight just to the left of center and just like towards the top half of the eye. We can keep going with the white, and we can add in a little bit of a highlight on the nose. So you can go back to the bristle end. I'm going to switch to the smaller brush this. I think that would be much easier for these last couple of bits to have the smaller brush. But we can add a little highlight. So the highlight on the nose is like right along that top edge. So I'm doing lots of little dashes. And then we need to make it look like these got nostrils. So it's like an M shape, halfway down the nose, or like a cartoon bird. And then it dips. You have a point in the middle. Okay. And we do need to add his eyebrows back in, because he looks a little bit, it looks really strange around his eyes, just because he's not got eyebrows. So I'm going to keep going with the white paint. I'm going to keep going with the small brush as well. I'm just going to add tiny little flicks, just going around the top of his eyes. like little fluffy eyebrows. And I've not got too much paint on the brush. It's almost like, yeah, just literally big fluffy eyebrows. So the paint, like direction of the paintbrush is going up and over. You can sort of tuck it around slightly. And same thing on the left. And it's quite nice if you blend it a little bit, like with the snout line as well. There's only bits like around the cheeks. I feel like that needs to be a little bit more defined. And in the snout, so you can go back over any of those white bits with the white. So I've got lots of blue still showing up around this bit. So I'm going to just paint over it with a bit more white. So 2 layers of white paint tends to cover up quite well. I'm just going back over the cheeks. Nice and filled in. If you wanted to add a bit of grey into it as well, you can. So it depends how detailed you want to go with this. You can have like grey shadows and blue shadows and all of the above. I think just going over the cheeks has made a big difference. Now, the eyes are made up of the same gold colour that we've got in the hat. So I'm going to keep going in the hat. I meant the crown. Can't call it a hat. Yeah, with the same small brush, and yeah, the crown golden colour. We're adding in like 2 little crescent moon shapes. So I'm leaving a bit of a gap between the edge of the eye and the highlight. And it's curving like that. So we're adding in a little bit of colour to the eye. I probably wouldn't do them that thick. If it has gone really thick, I pressed a bit hard on that, you can just go back in with the black. Because you definitely want a nice thick bit of black, so it's got nice big pupils around the white. That's a little bit better. And then the final, I've said that a few times, but the final step is a little bit of purple in the ear. So you can go back to any sort of shade of purple, mix it with a little bit of white paint so it's not too bold, and it just adds a little bit of 3D-ness to his ear. So they've got the little fluffy patch through the centre. I'm still using my small brush, I'm just doing little flicks, like side to side. If the purples come out really bold, but you can always go back over the top with a little bit of white. And there we go. We have something that looks a little bit like a corgi, hopefully. You can add purple to lots of areas of the body if you wanted to. So like the fur down here, you can have a bit of purple. So yeah, I hope that you have all enjoyed it, and I hope that it wasn't too stressful. I'm sorry that we ran over a little bit. But yeah, I would love to see these. So do take a photo of your finished piece. And yeah, send it to us at Brush Party. You can either post it on Facebook. It'd be lovely if you shared it publicly so everyone can see your gorgeous paintings. But yeah, thank you so much again. I hope you have a lovely rest of your Thursday evening. If you do have any questions, like after the live video is finished, if you've got any questions, just give us a message and we can help as much as possible. But yeah, see you all soon. Bye.